Tune those fiddles, floss that tooth, and uncork that moonshine. The Lovecraft Country Time Jamboree is back. Every week I'll be taking a look at each episode from the biggest horror series of 2020 as it drops. There'll be spoilers from here on out, but I'll try to keep them on the minimal. So there you go. You've been warned. Let's get to it.
Young Sagat.
Welcome back to ML Miller Frights, a part of the Kings of Horror Network. I'm ML Miller. While you might be watching this video on the Kings of Horror Network, I urge you to click over to my ML Miller Frights page after you finish this video and give that video a like, a share, click subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to ring that bell for notifications. I just want to get the word out for the Kings of Horror Network as well as the ML Miller Frights page. Also this week, I wanted to give a shout out to a little boy named Brian Finn who lives outside of Columbus, Ohio, and is a big fan of this channel. Lovecraft Country, Episode 5, was directed by Cheryl Dunye, and it's one of the better ones. Unlike the last episode, which felt like a cartoonish and lesser version of an Indiana Jones serial, Episode 5, named Strange Case, itself a reference to the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, felt more like the focused third episode of the season, which focused on Letty, played by Journey Smollett. Before diving into Episode 5, I wanted to point out a few things from the last episode that I felt was too spoilerific to talk about last week. But since a week's passed, I think it's okay to talk about it now. First, the sudden death of the trans character Yahima, played by Monique Candelaria, seemed to prickle the ire of quite a few online. I understand that representation is on top of demands for many, but that doesn't mean that a character is always supposed to have plot armor if it has that representation. Plot armor is simply bad storytelling. Yahima was a lesser character, and she seemed to have served her purpose in the story and moved the somewhat clunky plot along. This detail also highlights the struggle Montrose, Michael Kenneth Williams, has about his own sexuality. I'm not saying I want her to die, but I was much more interested in how her death affects Montrose, and sure enough, that is addressed in this episode. Montrose is a central character, so if a side character has to die to bring out his story, I'm not totally against it. Since this fifth episode dealt with the complex emotions one may have while understanding his own sexuality and what world he fits into, I think the series doesn't earn that ire that was tossed against it last week. What I did find more offensive was the frustratingly remedial way the trio of Atticus, Jonathan Majors, Letty, and Montrose found the entrance to the cavern. Not only was it a blatant Raiders of the Lost Ark ripoff, but you're telling me the switch to open the cavern under the museum is on a statue of an alligator in the tooth, which is within reach of anyone walking through the museum? It's not that the super tall Atticus finds the tooth lever. It's little Letty who walks right up to it and releases the lever. That means any kid who might have gone up and played with the alligator statue, and if you know kids, that's what they do. They stick their hands in the mouths of these statues. That means those kids ran the risk of opening the secret passage. Come on, Lovecraft Country. Do better. Now on to the fifth episode, Strange Case. And as the title suggests, it's all about metamorphosis and transformation. Central to this episode is probably my favorite character of the series, Ruby, played by Wunmi Mosaku. Last episode, Ruby made a deal with the devil of sorts when she shagged William, played by Jordan Patrick Smith. He promises Ruby that he can make all of her dreams come true, and this episode cashes in on both the promise and the price as Ruby wakes up as a white woman. Immediately, it's the Eddie Murphy SNL skit where he dons whiteface and goes around experiencing the white man in his own shoes. Ruby even gets a free ice cream cone as the white woman, something unfortunately I never got when I last entered Baskin-Robbins. Maybe I'm doing white wrong. Getting her dream job at Marshall Fields, Ruby experiences the way white people talk about black people. But not only that, she experiences something deeper and darker as her interactions with black co-worker Tamara, played by Sibongile Mulambo, are less than respectful. Once she understands that Tamara got her job without having any qualifications. What I love about Ruby is that things are much more complex than simple black versus white issues. Ruby's problems are a lot more personal and realistic as it refers to more character flaws and characteristics like feelings of ageism, weight discrimination, gender confusion, and obvious jealousy between Ruby and her much more svelte sister Letty, who doesn't look that much different than Tamara. Sure, there are black and white issues being dealt with in this episode, but the interactions between Ruby and Tamara were fascinating, as most TV and movies don't deal with these complex interactions that show more diversiveness going on back then as well as today. Again, by the end of this episode, there is a transformation going on with Rudy's character, and that's not just in the physical changes. Also, some folks might not have caught the fact that in her white woman form, Ruby's character is the same lady who was taking care of the dogs in the village outside of the castle in episode 2. But Ruby Uninterrupted is not the only metamorphosis highlighted in Strange Case. Right from the beginning, the themes of the chrysalis, the cicada, and the stages of change of butterflies and insects are peppered in. Montrose himself has a coming out of his shell moment here. After a fiery confrontation with Atticus, he finds himself retreating to his secret sex partner, Sammy, played by John Hudson Odom, where we find out Montrose doesn't kiss or show affection towards his partner. It's all about sex. Keeping with the theme of change, we see Montrose deal with the horror he committed last week by opening up to what he really is and how he feels as he watches Sammy perform in an underground drag queen party. Finally, the change theme also arises when we find out what the connection is between Christina, played by Abby Lee, and William. I'll discuss that next week to avoid explicit spoilers. This episode was Atticus and Letty light. They have a couple of scenes as they become closer and have a sexual encounter that's much more romantic than their first hookup. Most interesting, though, there are seeds planted in this episode that hint at a divide between these two characters later on in the story. Tick seems to think some good can come from the magic they're playing with, while Letty sees it all as evil. This is just the beginning of this disagreement, I feel. Mark my words. All in all, this is a solid and richly themed episode. There was a lot of goppy, gooey gore and some fun moments of suspense that paid off with some very solid scares. It might actually be the best of the bunch so far, even surpassing the focused third episode. This one is even more thematically and character-heavy as it really develops the stories of many of the tertiary cast and giving us much richer characters to root for. Despite the setting, tone, and eras these HBO series revolve around, character has always been the reason people fall in love with these shows. And while Tick and Letty are fun protagonists, I find the secondary characters infinitely more interesting as more risks can be taken with them. Next week seems to be unveiling the secret story of Tick's time in the military, and I'm looking forward to that mystery being highlighted. I will say that I'm rather annoyed with Alice Smith's Sinner Man being used at the end of every episode. It's a small pet peeve, but I prefer the outro music to be different every time, as it has been with most HBO series, rather than the same song ending every episode. But maybe that's just me. That'll be it for today. If you like this video, please pound that thumbs up button. Share this video with your social media addicted pals. If you're looking for written reviews, you can find them on mlmillerwrites.com. Don't forget about the new trade paperback for my comic book horror series, GRAVETRANCERS. It's out in all of the finer comic shops right now. And be sure to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell for alerts to be the first to see my videos. Thank you so much for your time, and take care.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. You're